Streets and Scholars, go back to episode number 1 and catch up, because we've talked about this topic and other topics multiple times. Just like last week was the first time we kind of talked about this Dublin, this all-female prison, federal prison, Dublin sex scandal. And you know what's crazy is that I did some more research on it, and there was a employee of the prison that was actually filing complaints with the federal government, I guess back in D.C. For years, and she claimed that all her complaints were being ignored. Her name was Tess Korth, 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 and apparently she's the one that really just blew the whistle on this, but apparently this was just normal activity going on in Dublin for years and years and years. I don't know how many, I mean, you could say this has been going on for 20 years or more.
You can, you know, but at the same time, you know, I'm wondering in what context did everything happen. Like I say, you know, it's hard. Sometimes, you know, it's hard for me to pick a side just based on the dynamics of, you have an inmate, you have a horny inmate, you have a horny man. I mean, it's just, you know, it's hard for me to draw the line on who's wrong and, you know, who's telling the exact truth. You know, that's basically what I'm saying.
Well, yeah. Well, Tess Korth, she was an employee of Dublin. She was a prison. She worked as a CO. And once she started to really file complaints and get this to the public, they relocated her. She had worked in Dublin for 25 years. Damn. Yeah. And she says that the BOP is ruining her life. I have a clip here I want to play of her because I want to get your take on what you think of her in terms of her credibility, of her story, and the information that she was reporting. So let me play this clip here.
Officer is speaking publicly about abuse she says she witnessed at the Dublin Federal Prison. So far, 5 officers have been charged for having sex with inmates.
New at 10 tonight, in a rare interview, Tess Korth broke her silence about leaving her job after 25 years. She says she was forced out for blowing the whistle, and now a Bay Area congresswoman wants answers.
I retired because I refused to be moved, uproot my family, my husband's business, and go work in a male facility up in Oregon where I have nothing. You know, after 25 years, I refused to be reassigned because I reported something. I told them to shove it and some other choice words. They've been reported. The things that other staff have observed them doing, like sitting in their office in the dark, watching inmates, terrorizing inmates, being abusive to other staff members, just things that they're not supposed to be doing, are ridiculous. And we've been reporting stuff for years, and you know, they still work there. They did COVID wrong, the COVID quarantining. They were locking pregnant inmates up, which is against policy. They're not supposed to do that. I kept telling them, you cannot lock up pregnant inmates. It's against our policies. You are not allowed to do that. They didn't listen to me. They didn't care. We ended up having one miscarry. I did a report to the Office of Inspector General. Within a few weeks of that report, everything turned upside down. I started being retaliated against. A few days after that, I got called into my supervisor's office. First time in 25 years, I got a letter of reprimand for questioning her leadership. We have to have better leaders. We have to stop the way that the Bureau does stuff. You know,
okay,
we have
so that's Tess Korth. We get the point there. What do you think of her whole, her version of events? One of the things, she's never been reprimanded in 25 years. They were giving her, they were moving her from Dublin to another place. The place in Oregon is a FCI called Sheridan. I don't know if you're familiar with
Sheridan. Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't want to go there, so she just retired. She had 25 years in, and I'm thinking that because she's a woman and she's seeing these female inmates go through whatever they're going through, that's the reason why she wanted to blow the whistle.
Right. I know she probably didn't want to uproot or move her family to Oregon, but from what I'm hearing, it's beautiful up there in Sheridan, Oregon. But I believe the things she's saying, Alex, no doubt. Don't get me misconstrued on what I'm finna say. She played it by the book. But she's also the classic whistleblower. Everything don't get played by the book, especially when you're dealing with prison. I'm sure with all this whistleblowing that she was doing, you know, and telling the truth. I'm not saying she was lying or anything. I'm saying she could have been telling the truth. But by her telling the truth and informing the truth, when they send people down there, investigators down there, they do interviews. You know, they talk to the inmates. You know, so the inmates, if enough inmates didn't say that this kind of abuse was going on, the staff saying this kind of inmate is not going on. If the ratio of how many inmates say that this bad stuff is not going on opposed to what she's saying, bro, it's not a problem. Because this is not to mention, they have to run a prison. It's not going to be perfect and it's not always going to be pretty. But I'm not saying she's lying at all. She could be telling the A1 truth and I believe her. It's just she don't seem like she understands the politics over the last 25 years because she been in the system so long that she realized and understand that policies are policies. She's a policy person. The BOP done changed. You know, 25 years ago, don't get me wrong, certain people that went to federal prison were different from the prisoners that's going there now. You know, even back in men's prisons when it come to federal. 25, 30 years ago, Alex, it was more white, you know, collar crimes, you know, bank robbery. Now they have the average street drug dealer in federal prison. So you have to deal with shit different. You know what I mean? And maybe she just didn't believe in, like she said, you can't lock a pregnant prisoner up. But if it was to protect them from COVID, with the space they have, they might have didn't have a choice. You know, there's so many prisons that's flooded that you have to, somebody up in the higher ups, like she said, her supervisor brought her in. And she said her. So that was also a woman.
Yes.
That wasn't a man. So the supervisor probably realized that in order to protect these women while they're pregnant, this is what we have to do. You know, and yeah, it may not be policy and it may not have been policy, but we haven't seen anything like COVID. I haven't seen anything like COVID in my life. So they probably took the necessary procedures that they took in order to try to protect him, and she didn't agree with because it wasn't policy.
So what's the reason to reprimand her? Say, you know what, we're gonna move you, we're gonna transfer you to a prison in a whole nother state. Why not just sit her down and say, look, we understand your concerns, but this is what we're gonna do, and just send her back to work and let her have, you know, go on her merry way.
A lot of people don't take that as face value, Alex. They take those aren't the rules. You know, they stand on the rules and they stand on their principles of being a stand-up employee. You know, they called what they call them. Damn, it's a name it's a name we used to call them. They company men, company women. You know, and they want to go exactly by how the rules were set forth. And she probably knew policy in and out. But everything ain't about policy, especially when 2020 came around and people had to, you know, everybody in America had to do what they had to do, you know. So sitting her down, she probably said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going for that. Everybody not going to turn a blind eye. And while the whole rest of the prison probably said, listen, we doing the best we can under the circumstances. The inmates probably wasn't putting in so many complaints. They probably said, listen, she's part of the problem because we still have to run a business. We can't disrupt the way this business is going on and do all these certain $1 million ideas that she have in order to put inmates in certain spaces and places and all that sort of stuff. It's easier to move her than to change the policy at this prison.
Okay, well, apparently she was one of the main people to kind of blow the whistle on all these employees at the BOP in Dublin that was having sex with multiple female inmates. Now, last week when we talked about these different guys that were having sex, that would have been Ross Klinger, John Bellhouse, Warden R.J. Garcia, James Highhouse, Enriquez Chavez. Only Ross Klinger has pled guilty, and so has the chaplain, James Highhouse. But we were unaware of if they were going to go to prison or not. Mm-hmm. You didn't think that this warranted prison time, but when we after the show was over, we did some research and we found out that James Highhouse actually got 7 years.
No doubt. And I was shocked, but at the same time, they, of course, I can only get the information that I can get and have my opinion that I have. I believe they had substantial evidence that he was doing more than I thought they was doing, and actually made a, not to mention, was that the warden?
Yeah, the warden. But
Yeah.
all his charges were related to having sex with the inmates.
Right, but my whole point was just more or less like I believe they held him at the highest standard. So we gonna punish you at the highest level, or we gonna punish you the most because we put you at the highest level. Man, you supposed to been able to look over this. If it was one of your subordinates, that you maybe turned a blind eye to, okay, maybe we can accept that. But when it's you yourself, no, we gonna make an example out of you. And it seemed like they did.
Yeah, one of the charges was sexual abuse of a ward, and I guess a ward is the inmate in Dublin.
Right.
And that's an interesting. I never heard of that offense. That's a real charge, sexual abuse of a ward. And even though some of the sex is consensual, maybe, well, I would say probably it's hard to actually say. See, this is what the attorney for some of these women, what she's going to say is none of this sex is consensual, even though they may have had the sex consensually. I'm putting air quotes, because of the relationship, the power dynamics between an officer and an inmate. Just because they consensually did it, they may have consensually did it under duress, knowing that there was no other choice in the matter. I don't know if that's something that you're gonna buy.
No, I'm not. I'm not, because at the end of the day, man, you have to physically beat a person up and take it if they said no. And my whole ideology was based on, you got 300 others that'll be like, hell yeah, but you're gonna beat this one up to say no. That was the part and I'm not saying it's impossible, or that was the one he liked the most. I'm not saying that's impossible. I'm just saying for the options that they have in these facilities, it just seemed to me that they wouldn't have went that route. You know what I mean? So that's why I, made a determination that I made.
Yeah. Well, Jessica Pride is an attorney from San Diego, and she's going to be representing at least one of these women. Actually, multiple women are coming forward. It seems like every time I go online and research the story, there's another female that's saying, "Oh, me too."
Well,
me
no
too.
doubt, you're going to get that because we got that, and we got that with the OJ cases.
Yeah.
But I mean, not the OJ. I'm sorry, Bill Cosby. You got the Me Too thing going on, and but this is one thing about it. I also have to look at, Alex, that sometimes when I look at certain women in prison, I look back and say one of my homegirls, and can say, man, there was no way that they took nothing from her. You know what I mean? She had to agree. But then I also have to go back and look at it's also women out there that's so submissive and so passive, and to believe that, I beat your ass or I lock you up, or they can't take solitary confinement, so they give in really unwillingly, but they do give in. So I do have to take all those dynamics into consideration that, all these females ain't some of my homegirls or something like that. It's really people that went to prison that was just really soft as cotton, that just was easy to manipulate even on the street. Once they got to prison, it was just like they felt like they had no other choice. So I do have to take those women in consideration and say maybe these women like that were manipulated and were, you want to be locked up or in a one-man cell, or you want to, do this, and they chose the latter. I do have to take those women into consideration and say that's highly, highly possible.
Now, what you just explained in terms of a woman that may be softer and docile and gives in to having sex with one of the employees, that can be considered a rape.
Definitely.
Even though she gave in, it wasn't forced, it wasn't taken, it wasn't, beat out of her.
No doubt. I really consider that as a rape. I talked about it last week where I couldn't see the vision, but when I went back and thought about it, bro, I said, hold on. I know some docile women. I know people that will, want to smooth the situation over before they put up any kind of fight, and I had to take them women in consideration.
Now, there's another woman that came forward and she identified herself. Her name is Andrea Reyes. She was in Dublin. She did a few years in Dublin, and she was one of the ones that Ross Klinger had sex with. She did an interview. I want to just play a couple minutes of her and what she says she went through at the FCI Dublin.